part of the reason why this is one of the biggest stories of the year is we are about to see a bunch of people who are powerful, successful, and feel like they know the best way to do things bring this approach into government. Hello and welcome to another episode of the BetaKit Podcast. I am Douglas Saltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit, and along with my co-host, Old Saint Rob Kennedy, we have survived another year. And as required for us to maintain our podcasting license, we are here to review the tech year that was. Now, last year, we said that 2023 was a year of navigating crises. What is this year all about? Let's dig in. Okay, Rob. Normally we start this podcast with witty banter, and I think we should probably start it with a firm disclosure that this is the second time we are recording our 2024 year in review, not because we loved the year so much we wanted to run it back, but after 400 episodes of podcast recording, we can still fuck up the technical considerations to the point that the audio is unusable. No, our dog ate it. So this is, in fact, the second time we are going through what this wonderfully conceived podcast of our 4 biggest tech stories of the year. And then because this year has been one of us chasing fun conceits to pod about, we will be giving a couple of annual grade reviews to companies, organizations, maybe even individuals if we get crazy with it in the back end of this podcast. Additional disclosure. Last week, we also recorded our 2025 predictions, which initially came after our 2024 review and is now coming before. And we are also now recording this the day of, the big day of the fall economic statement, which followed a new finance minister because the old one resigned before delivering the fall economic statement. You can read.
So by the time this airs, does this mean there's just a totally different, 3 governments later? Is that what's going to happen?
You will be finance minister by the time that this gets out.
I don't want it.
Just so you know, a couple things. We're referring to this at a point in time where the Liberals that are at a fundraiser in Gatineau. There's a Christmas party tomorrow. Who knows if there's going to be a resignation or a prorogue. There is a new finance minister. The fall economic statement is out. You can read about that at BetaKit. By the time this is out, you could probably also read about whether any of that matters. But we want to be clear, transparent, and upfront with you, particularly since our 2025 prediction episode, not only in the podcasting ways of old, dramatically refers back to our original recording that we're not using, but also contains a couple predictions on my end that are looking rather silly at this moment. And I think we'll only progress in silliness as we get closer to 2025. So all that being said, we're going to do this again for the first time. And this is the better of the 2 episodes. I say that with complete confidence. Okay.
That's true.
Rob, preamble out of the way. Let's get into this. Again, the way that we did this is that we decided to talk through what we thought were some of the largest stories of the year. And this is not only Canadian tech, but tech from a Canadian perspective, as we like to do on the BetaKit podcast. We've chosen 4. Rob and I are going to alternate between our selections and kind of talk them through. But even before we get into our big stories, again, I want to attack this idea. Last year we had the death of SVB, the sudden death of SVB. We had an OpenAI leadership coup and then a eventual return. And then we had a last minute Google deal to save news in Canada. How are, maybe today's events aside, feeling about 2024 as a year in tech?
I didn't even know that was a year ago, the SVB thing. Holy cow. Yeah. I mean, it's gotten, I really think there's we need a new time demarcation like AP and PP, anti-pandemic and post-pandemic, and also PP. Because I think that who cares what happened before the pandemic? And everything that happened after the pandemic seems like it's super fast and super slow at the same time. It feels like a completely different universe that we're in. I mean, Trump was reelected. There was no even, Biden was even running. Like, just all this crazy stuff has happened over the last year. So, I don't know how you feel. I think, what do you think? Does this feel exactly like you expected it to feel?
Okay. Well, okay. For longtime listeners, you know how we're struggling with this. I'm going to say this is the first time of I don't know how many times is going to happen on this episode. So feel free to drink when it shows up again. Well,
Yeah.
Rob, you happened to say to me something quite interesting on our previous recording, which was that you had noticed a sense of optimism to the year. And if you were talking about the general post COVID or during COVID, mid COVID malaise and the lack of a sense of time and reality has led to, we've done a lot of year in reviews that have been filled with existential dread.
That's true.
This year, you had noticed a small sense of optimism, a lens towards that. Can I please point you back to the interesting conversation we had before once again for the first time? Sir.
Thank God you have better memory. I agree with me, first of all. That's a fair point. That also true. I think that, last year we were kind of in this purgatory state where we're like, we're just going to see. We're just going to see. And it does feel like this year. I mean, looking into the fall, again, notwithstanding what's going on right now, in the tech space that we happen to be in, looking at the energy, the desire to start funding, the desire to start building companies, there seems to be a corner being turned. Yes, as predicted, this year and late last year, there were companies that were in the Series A and B in-ish state that were in a dangerous spot. They had not gotten necessarily product market fit or traction, or not gotten breakout traction to be able to live long enough. And some of those companies had to go away. In fact, you covered some of them and had conversations with some of those entrepreneurs. But we feel like we're over that hump. It feels like we're moving in the right direction. There's a sense of optimism in every particular direction. I don't sense this sort of like forlornness. And quite frankly, judging from what I've seen on LinkedIn, the way that the political machine is moving seems to actually move towards a sense of optimism. We might actually have some change in the air that will speak to the productivity crisis that we have in Canada as well.
Or like an aggressive desire to build out of spite or to prove them wrong. Yeah, there is that pendulum swing back. I will also say, you're totally right. In a lot of our coverage, we've been like, how many companies are going to go under? Things are going to be tight. What's going on? Obviously, this year we've reported on it was a bad year for venture. BetaKit is running a series the week that I am recording this, delayed slightly by today's fall economic statement news, are Canadian tech stories of the year. And one of the things that we noted was the huge tidal wave of executive turnover at companies. But I think that's to your point. There's this forcing function of, in past years, it's like, are these companies going to make it? What's going to happen? Some companies go under. The companies that exist now are the ones that have kind of made it through that window. And if not having turned the corner, are in position to or working to, when we get to in the back end, some of our Canadian tech companies that we're evaluating, this is not an industry-wide circumstance, but there are some Canadian tech companies that had a very, very good year and are very excited about next year. And it's been difficult.
And their names rhyme with Cohere.
Okay. Well, yes. But, I'm not sure we would have been willing to say that about very many individual companies at any size and scale, or the field at large last year from a tech perspective. So I think that is totally valid.
Absolutely. And maybe that takes us to our first topic of antitrust.
Our first biggest story of 2024.
Biggest story of 2024.
Very optimistic as well, I'd say, Rob.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And the question we asked ourselves is big tech finally being broken up? I mean, obviously there's if you've been paying attention, especially in the fall of this year, there's a number of lawsuits that are up against Google. One, Lina Khan Lena Khan, the chairperson of the FTC, sued Google on the search side, and came down with a guilty verdict that Google is guilty of being a search monopoly. And then Google is in the middle of a lawsuit. I guess Alphabet technically is in the middle of a lawsuit, whether they, on the other side of the marketplace, the selling side where their actual money is made, are they illegally monopolizing the advertising industry? And it's not looking great for them, but there's no verdict that's come down yet. And then, of course,
just some strong recommendations that we have podcasted about before, namely maybe the abdication of Google Chrome. And if that isn't enough, let's just take Android too.
That's just on the search side. That's not on the advertising side. That's not a remedy on that side, because they haven't even gotten guilty yet. And then the Competition Bureau, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, as of right after the Americans said guilty on the search side, but while they're in the middle of the lawsuit on the advertising side, the Competition Bureau sued Google for anti-competitive conduct on the advertising side as well. So there's talk about Google breakup, although, and there's also constant noises about Apple. Apple already Meta. In the EU. Yeah, absolutely. On the
Amazon. There was a story, I believe was it The Information or The Verge, about Microsoft being interviewed about one of the Google antitrust cases, and they just threw them under the bus. They're like, hey, go check out this other thing that's going on. So that's I think is Netflix the only FANG company right now not being investigated for antitrust in the United States or elsewhere in the world?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess the N is safe.
So why is this a big deal? And I maybe ask you, to what extent do you actually think we will see a big tech company be broken up, or any of this antitrust, anti-monopolistic, pro-competition pursuit shape or change any of these companies' profit margins, products, or again, our relationship to the internet?
It's funny because I think that, Google's the advertising side, where they make the money, is the scarier one, to be totally honest with you. The search monopoly or whatever is fine. I think that it's taken them a long time to get to the lawsuit, the guilty verdict, and now the remedy part. Don't forget, of course, that a new government in the States is coming in.
Yep.
I'm sure the chairperson will be replaced, although they're coming in on a populist wave, which may portend that they're going to keep walking down this path. And again, if they just said that, Zuckerberg donated $1 million for Trump's inauguration, and so did Bezos and everyone else, just to stay on the good side. But it's kind of on the whims of Trump, whether he wants to, if you're on his good side or on his bad side. So there's the incoming administration. And then, I don't know, man, I'm sure you remember September 6th of 2001, right before September 11th, wackily, when Microsoft was deemed guilty of being a monopoly for bundling Internet Explorer into the operating system so that they could defeat Netscape. Remember Netscape? It was the OG browser.
Yep.
On September 6th, they settled with the government and paid them a lot of money, and they said, go away. And so they never, the talk heavily was break up Microsoft because they're unstoppable.
Yeah,
they didn't.
Yeah,
I don't know. Do you see it the same way?
Well, without bleeding too much into our 2025 prediction episode, which was informed by this, I will say, on the Trump side, the new FTC chair selection, Andrew Ferguson, has said he's going to, hold big tech to account. At least one of the Google suits started under a DOJ that was in the former Trump administration. Now we've in the Chrome browser episode that we did the day before, the Competition Bureau was like, us too, we will also sue Google. We had discussed that Trump has had a variety of conversations with U.S. big tech leaders, including our prime minister, flying down to Mar-a-Lago. So there's like an art of the deal component to this. But just the idea that across, it's not just Microsoft here, across the spectrum and across North America and internationally, these companies are not only being tried, in the case of Google, they're being found to be a monopolist, is I think pretty significant. We won't see the payout this year, but it's a huge story that impacts, the 4 or 5 archipelagos that kind of define our internet experience.
We're going to get, I already know how it's going to happen. We're going to get a $3 Tim Hortons gift card for our problems and move on. That's going to happen.
But you have to leave a Google Maps review of the Tim Hortons location.
Yes.
Because they're going to need the data some other way.
Two-factor authenticate yourself. So what's been on your mind 2024 wise?
Last year we did a podcast about the techno optimists, as led by Mark Andreessen, who had drafted a manifesto of sorts, I think by his own terms, for techno optimism, this EAC movement, which, if you go back to that episode, I think is making bad faith arguments in a lot of different ways, but fundamentally believes that like there's nothing in society that should slow down tech innovation, that it is the ultimate pursuit of society for society's good and well-being, and question anyone who would question it, right? And I think I said at that time, concern troll, trying to forward the discourse, you decide. I said, what happens when the technologists decide what they do is more important than governments, and they don't want to play by those rules? Really weighty stuff here. Once again, pointing to how bad I am at making predictions. One of the big stories of this year is, what if instead of trying to overthrow the government, the EAC techno-optimists turn into Doge Bros and just become the government? As we have seen following the recent US election and Elon Musk and the Department of Governmental Efficiency, there is this push to like, well, if Elon can get rid of 80% of ex-employees, why don't we do that for the government? The Atlantic has stories out. Mark Andreessen has been quite happy recently. Was on the Joe Rogan podcast saying it's morning in America. He had also, to your point, Rob, donated about $4.5 million to a Trump super PAC, actively lobbying and working with potentially Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy on this Department of Government Efficiency. They've gone after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Again, Andreessen's a huge crypto person. I wonder why. Musk has tweeted, delete the CFPB. Instead of saying last year that tech and I guess the opportunity to make money is more important than any and all governments in a global society, we now have these people being like, you know what? Let's just run governments the way that we run startups. And this is a huge story, not only because of the proximity that some of the richest, most powerful people in tech now have with democratic power, that this is something that we have seen bleed into Canadian tech, as we are wont to do. We like looking and seeing what's going on in the US. It has been, I don't even want to say an open secret, that a lot of people paid attention to what happened after Elon Musk took over Twitter and was maybe they were emboldened by that chance to swing the pendulum back from, again, that 2017 open borders, diversity is our strength, everybody work from home, we're in service of our employees attitude. Just today, a few hours after the fall economic statement was included with 62 billion-ish in deficit. Although, Rob, as you were noting before when we were recording, that includes like a one-time $20 million reconciliation.
Billion.
Billion, sorry. With the B.
Okay.
Payments. We have John Ruffalo, formerly of Omers Ventures and the founding managing partner of Mavericks Private Equity, saying to the naysayers out there who don't think that Canada requires its own Doge equivalent program, I will give you 62 billion reasons why. We're going to mention a couple more examples of this later on in the podcast when we kind of do our letter grade reviews. But the idea of running all of society like a startup or a business has been and the willingness of the tech to participate in this as they have found their angle in is a huge story that, again, we will more likely see the impacts of next year, but it's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. I understand the impetus to do this. You look at, I actually think that what Elon Musk did at Twitter was actually the right thing to do. I think the way he did it was dickish. But at the end of the day, the whole point of software companies is they scale infinitely. And so having gigantic amounts of staff seems like counterintuitive. However, the government in any country is not a business by definition, and it shouldn't be run like one. That's not to say it should be inefficient. I don't think there's any country in the world that'll be like, yeah, I like my government bureaucracy. And at the same time, it should not be treated not only like not a business, but not a software business, which is by definition, again, about scaling infinitely and getting rid of humans and automating everything. Yeah. I don't think we want to call into an automated government that tells you that just the robot decides whether you get audited or not. There's nobody to talk to.
Well, and also those businesses that also don't make any money until the very, very end, in which case they might do. Yeah. Like, I use this quote all the time because I think it's, it really nails it. This is Harley Finkelstein, president of Shopify, always like to say that entrepreneurship is a form of problem solving. Now, I think he presents it as the primary form of problem solving and perhaps the best one, but there are other forms of problem solving. And the way in which you do things can often matter as much as what you do. Might have even been proven out today during the fall economic statement. The way things go about really matter, particularly for governments that are representations of people. I completely agreeing with you on this point. I think part of the reason why this is one of the biggest stories of the year is we are about to see a bunch of people who are powerful, successful, and feel like they know the best way to do things, bring this approach into government. And again, it's almost like with each of our selections for this year, it's not so much the singular moment that was crazy and happened. It's like, hey, that giant glacier that hasn't moved or that iceberg that's been sitting there for some time is starting to wobble. And where might it be next year? And I think, barring some late December surprises of the likes which we saw today, we're gonna see this stuff play out next year. What also might we see continue next year, Rob, as our third major story of the year?
I mean, the thing we've incessantly talked about as part of our predictions at the end of last year was AI. And what we have seen is unbelievable amounts of spending. And the question is, if there is a return on that investment, when does that return on investment show up? The big tech companies, whatever the new acronym is now, MAGA, I don't know. But whatever with FANG was, Manga. Yeah. Oh, that's way better. I like Manga. There's, we should invent a couple companies just so that it spells the Manga, are set to spend about $1 trillion in the next 5 years on AI. Just $189 billion was spent in 2024 on
just
capital
a couple
expenditures.
Trillion.
What's a trillion when you plus or minus? And I think NVIDIA's numbers in Q3 were reported at $35 billion in revenue.
Yes.
So, OpenAI's revenue was $300 million last August, or in August, up 1,700% since the beginning of 2023. And they expect $3.7 billion in sales this year. But they recently raised $6.6 billion, valued at $157 billion.
Yeah.
Raadical raised $800 million fund.
Yeah. This isn't just a US thing. Yeah. Canada thing as well.
Torrent just raised $700 million at a $2.6 billion valuation.
Slightly less Canadian thing.
So it was yesterday. So there's just a metric ton of money going into, and we even talked about it a bunch of episodes ago, where the current, as of taping, government put 2.4 billion into the AI supercluster. What was it, $2 billion of which was for compute, so hardware. So big investments privately and publicly in owning the AI space, and it seems to not be ending, quite the opposite.
Yeah. I think, and this is us trying to parse the line of these, I guess, ongoing stories, but the ways in which they're developing. I think it was at the end of the year, 2021, we had like a Meet Shaw on the podcast, and he was like freaking out about AI. And then the beginning of 2022, I think we did maybe like 8 AI podcasts in the first quarter of the year. Like, we have been talking about this stuff for since the minute people woke up to ChatGPT version 3.5.
Yes.
This year, like 189 billion in capex in 2024, just amongst the manga, is an insane amount of spending.
Yeah.
OpenAI having a $6.6 billion valuation.
6.6.
Oh,
they
yes,
raised 6.6
sorry.
at $157 billion.
My brain
and they're going to
always
run out of
screws
money
that
next
up.
year. Well, because it's such a ridiculous amount of money.
Yes.
And they're going to run out of money next year if they don't raise more money.
Yes.
That's the crazy part.
That's the thing. The
Their
only
burn rate kind of
company actually making money is Nvidia, and everyone else is spending on some ultimate expectation of return. There at some point has to be an outcome driving this, or the funding spigot will stop, and we will see retrenchment. We'll see consolidation. We will see everything that we see in every other industry. The spending thing, we are not talking about the viability of the technology, like the specific products versus the other, which are like every 2 weeks, it's a neck and neck race anyways, depending upon what version of Claude rolls out or whatever. This is purely like the amount of capital put into unproven tech that has often yet to be productized on the expectation of exponential returns. This would be like in like 1990 saying, oh my God, the cloud is going to be the biggest thing in the world in 12 years. We need to spend 189 billion right now to make sure that we own cloud in a decade or in 5 years or whatever. We're just real-time witness to the
ungodly sums of money.
Well, but to the trying to find the product market fit in a way that didn't happen when, cell phones were around 10 years commercially, broadly, before the iPhone, and then it kicked up. We're watching it kick up before, I guess, it is true. OpenAI is making money. Lots of people are using that product.
It is generating revenue.
Yes.
Sorry to be pedantic about it. But
they are making money, which they then immediately set on fire. Right?
Exactly.
Point taken. But the scale and would you say the earliness with which the bet is being made at this scale?
Yeah.
Is almost as
remember
important
when
as the
Meta bought or Facebook at the time bought Instagram for $1 billion. We're like, that's crazy. They bought WhatsApp for $1 billion. We're like, that's crazy. They bought Oculus for $1 billion. We're like, that's crazy.
That's like one day of model testing today.
And even, what is that, $2015? That's $1.2 billion of $2024. Like, it's not, it is just such an astronomical difference. There's clearly a land war. My bet, my if I were betting with my chips, I would say that
credits.
Yeah, exactly, which burn very quickly on AI, I've been told by startups. The Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, at the end of the day, those chips will continue to exist in their data centers, because where are you going to run those things? In your data centers. In fact, I just bought some software to up-res some photos using these AI models. And it was like, I don't know, it's on sale. It's like $50 and it'll up-res the pictures so you can turn double or triple, quadruple the resolution of a photo. And it looks okay depending on the model you use. But
it's like, it will take 4K HDR.
Kinda. And it's like, would you like this to take 4 days, or would you like to upload this to the cloud and use some credits and then we can do it in 20 minutes? I'm like, okay, so they'll burn down a rainforest and
How many
or
gallons of
wait
water?
like, well, I don't even remember what episode we talked about it, but I think the Globe had this article where I think every 1 to 4 queries of a chat GPT is like dumping a half a liter of water onto the ground in terms of water use. So it's not nothing. But I think the data centers are the winners in all of this whole little game, which is like at the end of the day, you still need the compute, and it doesn't matter how much more efficient you get. You're still going to want to run in the cloud, both your app, probably, although the trends are moving in the other direction at this exact moment in time, and the AI stuff. You want to run that in the cloud. So who's going to win?
They're
those guys
committing so much time, money, and resources to this that they're like Fang Manga is openly considering purchasing or building their own nuclear reactors.
Yeah,
to
3
fuel
Mile
this
Island,
stuff.
baby.
Like, but maybe, Rob, I want to close off this segment by noting, I don't know if we actually talked about the water thing on the past recording of this episode that no longer exists, or the future episode that we have yet to release that was recorded before this. So we are now technically an AI hallucination, and a perfect summary of 2024.
All right.
Okay.
So okay, Douglas, what's your last big story of the year?
Oh, my last. I like how you're putting this on me. No. Stories come in 4s. It's a rule of 4s. Everybody knows that. We were looking for, again, we got some stuff in the back section of this podcast, but we're looking for ways to articulate the big things that stand out. And we talked last year about the death of social media. We have talked pretty extensively about the rise of algorithmic media. I was on the Candleland podcast talking about that stuff. We have talked to founders of social media alternative apps that now no longer exist. RIP Post News. I don't want to belabor that again, particularly on a day like today, where talking with my CEO, Siri Agrell, who's no longer on social media, was like, hey, what's going on X? What? Read me some tweets. And I was like, I'll read you some tweets. I have all the tweets. And I got that cortisone shot today on a day in which I needed it. This isn't a conversation about the products of social media. This is a conversation about something new in reaction. 2024 was the year that an alternative to Web 2.0 has emerged. We're going to run it back and we're going to build back better. Federated media became a real, if not viable thing, a thing that has consumer, general populace level of adoption. Coming in, obviously post US election, the ongoing utilization of X as Elon Musk's personal bully pulpit to I don't know, have a right hand seat next to Donald Trump. We've got Blue Sky at or above 25 million users at time of recording, adding about 1 million users per day. That's nowhere in comparison to X, Facebook, Instagram. Even Threads is like 275 million. But 25 million is nothing to sneeze at. And it seems as though people are actively pursuing Blue Sky, not only as just an alternative space to X, but because in acknowledgement that the town square is dead and we will always be siloed. Might it be better for you to run your own silo and define the experience yourself than having a white middle-aged dude be responsible for like 2/3 of all social media that we have online? Federated media, not yet there, still a minor thing, but it is on the board as an alternative to social media. And I think that is incredibly interesting.
Yeah, it's funny because it felt dead. There was definitely like a spike of a heartbeat. And there's the Fediverse, which is like you in Instagram, I believe, or Threads, I think you can access in a very wacky way the plumbing of the Fediverse if you go to a very specific place. It's not like
you can receive content from the Fediverse now. You can't quite post out yet.
Right. but they're putting their money where their mouth is. They said they would do it. They're doing it. I mean, it is to their advantage to a certain extent, but so there's that. Yes, there's Blue Sky, which is a different version of it. And the question is, will it fragment to the point where it'll be in a way weirdly siloed, where you're kind of getting your own, like Threads is noticeably moderated, or should I say noticeably not completely insane. So something's going on that's keeping it from being insane.
Well, but I do get a lot of like, hey, I had a weird date last night. Click through this thread to learn more content from people that I've never wanted to hear from, who might not even be real. And Threads is still fundamentally unwilling to give you a chronological reverse order of content, which is just commonplace amongst the other things. But to what you're saying, I actually think the control of the media is now a value proposition. And what federated media is offering is you actually have a dictate over this rather than an algorithm. Like one of Blue Sky's monetization plans is to like sell moderation packs so that you can buy your own algorithms, that you're self-curating this. Mastodon, which we haven't talked a lot about because let's be honest, folks, is trying to do that at a more traditional like server level. So you're like community level control. But just the idea that we are going to go back like Lost and look to refactor or rebuild the internet to fork the 2.0, the web 2.0 that happened for a new thing is, again, a glacial shift that we will see play out in future years, but a pretty major glacial shift. A successful Canadian entrepreneur is offered millions from Silicon Valley for his data and analytics business. As CEO Tom Oliver considers the deal, he is targeted by an unknown perpetrator, and his friend, homicide detective Jason Liu, must strive to keep him safe. This is not a BetaKit story, folks. This is the plot of Devious Web, a new Canadian tech thriller by author Shelley Grandy. If you are looking for a last-minute gift for your colleagues or family, visit shelleygrandy.com to order your copy today. And to settle the mystery of how a Canadian author was so inspired to write about Toronto tech, well, this author is the mother of Willful founder and former BetaKit managing editor, Aaron Burry. Walk, don't run to shelleygrandy.com today. Link in the show notes. I would say maybe the fifth biggest story of the year in tech has been our constant struggle to find a dumb conceit with which to try new things and have podcast conversations. And barring our failed Battleship episode and that time that we made on an audio-only podcast at the time, Rob describe a bell graph. The one that stuck the best was our grading, our annual grades. We're just two nutty professors out here in the world, and we want to evaluate you on subjective performance. And last time that we did this, I think it was the back end of just an updated news episode, and it was mostly AI companies. Now we just got a selection here of organizations and companies that we want to grade on their 2024 performance. Now, note, this is a podcast. This is all in good fun. This isn't BetaKit's editorial stance on these companies. I also note there's a lot of companies and people in here. Like this isn't the full factoring of what's going on in Canadian tech. Like, we don't have Clio on the list here, but you guys raised like the biggest round in Canadian history. Jack Newton was at our town hall in Vancouver. You had a really awesome year. A+, great on you. We've pulled through a selection of companies that we maybe felt like grading and felt like we had something to say about their grades. So if you are not on the list, it's not that you didn't have a great year or things like that. It's just this is a conversational conceit. I think the thing that I will say up front before we get to it, and this is a little bit more important, and again, lessons from the last recording of this episode, everybody drink. we are grading on a curve here. Our evaluations for earlier, later stage companies are going to be a little bit different. Now, you might consider that a bit of tall poppy syndrome, or you might consider that, I guess, again, grading on a curve and holding people to higher standards.
So what you're saying is this is completely subjective. It's totally made up. It's based not even on our opinions, and it's not consistent.
Yeah, and we're still going to eat shit for it.
Yes.
That said, let's get into our annual grades. I hope it becomes tradition. I want to start this one off, and I think maybe I'll go through, Robin, and I'll hit you with. I'll give you the report card. I'll give you the essay results. I'll tell you about their papers. We'll talk about the parent teacher meeting. Hit it with the grade, and then we'll discuss whether or not we feel that grade resonates. Yes. To the point up top that there are some Canadian tech companies that had a really good year and are going into next year feeling pretty good about themselves. I would like to start with Wealthsimple, Exhibit A. Valued at $5 billion.
What do they do exactly?
Being a broke journalist, I couldn't tell you, but I think no. So valued at $5 billion now. This is beyond their pandemic high and featuring two different markups of their valuation this year from owners, Power Corp, and then a massive secondary round, the BetaKit covered. So $5 billion valuation beyond their pandemic high, a real counter to the markdowns that happened post Doge crypto craze. They entered into the mortgage space this year after acquiring Pine when competitors have been leaving the mortgage space. They got 3 million users and 58 billion in total assets under administration. And they in the 10th year anniversary episode that we spoke with them, pretty forthright at that time. That they're looking to IPO. This isn't a biggest Canadian tech story of the year that we're going to be running, but it's something that you might see on BetaKit before the year is over because I'm a psychopath. 2024 was a year in which we saw fintech disruptors in Canada pursue incumbent status. This is not an easy space to compete in. You've got to win on trust. You've got to spend money, and your product's got to be pretty good. Wealthsimple, I got to give you an A-. Well done.
I'm inclined to give them an A. Just a little
Straight
bit. Straight A. I believe the AUM, the assets under management, is closing in on traditional funds like or traditional like asset managers like AGF. So they're not.
Yeah, it's not just
trivial.
Yeah,
it's pretty freaking substantial.
They have to be taken seriously.
Yeah, and they're. I mean, they kind of played it. They were lucky, and they played their hand very well at the same time. You know, so both have to be true. They weren't like Series A or Series B when it all went to poop, and they hit the right market at the right time and are growing up with that market. Right, like that market when they were first millennials, they were kids and they didn't know what to do with their money, and then they started to need to at least want to buy houses. Now there's mortgages, so they have continued to execute despite the dips in the road quite impressively. So I'm kind of all on board with it.
You're just straight
really
A.
An impressive company. It's just a straight A.
I'm not against it. I can't even remember why I put A-. I think your A argument is strong. I'm just going to say I enjoy giving Mike Hatchin a really hard time, and I'll bump him down a mark just to see what he comes back with next year. Okay, next up, another Canadian tech company. Rob referenced them before. Rhymes with Cohere. That's because it is Cohere. What did Cohere do this year? You know, we were talking about the astronomical dollar commitments. They raised a $500 million USD round, raised at a $5.5 billion valuation. Now, importantly, though, that's on revenue of about $35 million annualized, according to reports from The Information and others, which like puts Cohere at more than 140x forward revenue, which is a little tart. My mouth sours a bit when it comes to that. Speaks to the AI space. But again, the reason why one of our biggest stories of the year was like, there's a lot of dollars going into AI, dollars have to come out, is for companies like Cohere. I would also note, as it relates to this, $500 million USD at a $5.5 billion valuation is quite a bit. Rob set off in the first segment, OpenAI raised $6.6 billion. So OpenAI raised more money in the back end of this year than Cohere's valuation. You have Anthropic that did $4 billion from Amazon at an $18 billion valuation. Like Cohere is not necessarily leading the pack when it comes to, I guess, financing this very, very, very expensive product to be developed. And if you were to look at it, they're actually not really performing the best when it comes to their models or efficiency or cost. This is a Canadian company filled with Toronto mans of the Jeffrey Hinton coaching tree, who are mentioned and referenced in that global A list of evaluation, but they're not at the top of that list. So I am going to give them a B plus. We had Ivan Zhang at our BetaKit Town Hall in Toronto. Really appreciated the time. One of the co-founders of Cohere has a Gemini nominated indie rock band that is actually quite good. These are fun people to have in your class with middle of the pack performance. And I'm only giving them a B plus because, again, I want to see what happens when they start taking this stuff seriously. When they go from the freshman, the sophomore, to that upperclassman level, are they going to come back and say, hey, we're really serious about generating revenue from the enterprise? Or are they going to be another Element AI? It's up to them. Are they going to spend their summer tree planting? Or are they going to get a real job with a suit and a tie? I don't know. But for now, B plus. Rob, what is your grade?
I think I'm a B. So I'm just a little nervous. So, it's kind of fortuitous that we recorded it. The gentleman named Patrick Tammer, who I know, this is just for you, everybody. A gentleman named Patrick Tammer, who is an advisor with Scale AI and does some investing, posted something today on LinkedIn about his thoughts on Cohere being smart about being vertically integrated with both software and hardware, where OpenAI has a deal with Microsoft and Anthropic does, right? But it's not their infrastructure. It's OpenAI working with Microsoft at the moment, at least. And Anthropic doesn't have their own infrastructure either. Although since we also recorded this the first time, Amazon at their reInvent conference announced they have their own models that they're launching that run on their Bedrock infrastructure, so that they own vertical stuff. So the argument is that Cohere owning the entire stack is a better play for them than just being software, which I don't necessarily disagree with. It's a really interesting point. I think the only problem that I have is the points that you made. It's these companies are worth, just because they got $240 million. $240 million is 2 NVIDIA chips. I've done the math. 2 NVIDIA. I'm just kidding.
I would also say here, you were talking about distribution. OpenAI has sweetheart deals with Microsoft and a free deal with Apple.
Exactly.
And Cohere has to convince large enterprise to pay them money and provide value. And that's actually like the harder argument to make. And they're doing it with unproven tech. They're doing so much interesting stuff with different languages because, the large language models we have right now are mostly dog shit outside of English. Very, very cool stuff. But they sell to enterprise, and I get a just happy to be hanging out in the grad bar energy from them. I want to see them come back next year looking like they want to be valedictorian.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think that the dichotomy here is that because effectively these models are commoditized, at the end of the day, it's really a capital problem. It's not can you invent a better mousetrap? It's everyone's inventing the same mousetrap and they're throwing more money at it to get to shine it up so that they're slightly ahead of the other one. So I think on the one hand, big freaking capital problem. On the other hand, I think what they have going for them is trust. The end of the day, who do you trust to mess with your shit? I was in AWS last December, actually, with a client of mine and having a chat with one of their people who was sort of their de facto. He didn't own AI for Amazon or anything like that or AWS, but definitely was super interested in it. And this was after OpenAI got the $1 billion from Microsoft and before the Palace intrigue that happened. So there was this little gap in the middle. And he's like, we have this product called Bedrock where you could spin up your own LLMs. And I'm like, who cares? Why does that matter? Like, why don't you just use OpenAI? And he's like, people don't trust OpenAI. And I'm like, but no one ever got fired for buying Microsoft, right? And he's like, a bunch of their customers just don't trust OpenAI. Simple as that. And so
we'll get to why when we grade OpenAI at the end of this.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, cool. So like, it's not a technology play. It's do you trust this person with my data? And because the internet's been around for a while and we've learned some things, the question is, who do you want to get in with and how do you want to do business with them? And so I think Cohere has an opportunity here, but boy, oh boy, did they need a lot more capital to really fight the good fight. And I'm not sure how they do that.
You know, Rob, like we can't grade them on future expectation, only current performance. I'm going to say nice things about them in the parent-teacher meeting, but you know, I am as a guidance counselor for Canadian tech, I am paying attention to their growth and development. Okay. Let's talk about an upperclassman here and you know, I guess disclosures. BetaKit is majority owned by Good Future, which is a family office founded by two ex-Shopify leaders. We're talking about Shopify next. Hey, still Canada's largest tech company by market cap. Their stock is up. If you want to talk about that post-COVID turnaround, 67% year to date. Ooh, that's nice. That is a nice share recovery for Canada's largest tech company, doing about $2 billion in revenue per quarter. That is not NVIDIA numbers, which is crazy to say comparing a hardware company to a software company. But
I know
no one is doing NVIDIA numbers. So the vibes are very strong, and there's been a lot of stories, even how they're taking market share from like Salesforce and all this stuff. They're going into the larger enterprise retailers. You know, they just had their largest Black Friday, Cyber Monday of the year. This is a grade that is if you just look at the marks, the test scores, the multiple choice, the quantitative math analysis stuff, very, very high. However, when we talk about the growth and development of young companies maturing into adult leaders of Canadian tech, there is a social component to this. And I will say, advocating for the federal government to break the Canada Post strike, do whatever is necessary to resolve the strike, which seems pretty aggressive. The Globe and Mail actually just put out their board games ranking of board governance across, I think, 240 of Canada's companies. Interesting to note, the largest company by market cap in Canada, RBC, ranked number one. Shopify ranked dead last. And a lot of those reasons why they ranked so low were because of a lack of, you know, kind of board and leadership independence when it comes to the relationship between CEO and founder Toby Lukey and that, and additional commitments to DEI and ESG and some other things that you would expect a mature company to, you know, even if it's a checkbox task, take seriously. Shopify doesn't really seem to. To our point on the Doge Bro, we've had, you know, real about face from Welcome to Canada, Diversity is Our Strength to CEO Toby Lukey coming out in favor under very different circumstances, acknowledges a lot has changed over the last 8 years, to Canada being more restrictive in its immigration policy. You had Harley Finkelstein, who I mentioned before, president of Shopify, saying the solution is never more regulation online, which is, I would say, ill-considered for someone who's very, very thoughtful about entrepreneurship as a problem-solving mechanism. And you have, and again, I want to note everything I reinforced off the top of this section. I'm going to read to you a Dan DeBow tweet, VP of Partnerships with Products at Shopify, that was deleted shortly after it was posted. But I think it speaks to a level of unseriousness, lack of consideration, or maybe care for things that adult mature companies should care about. This is Dan DeBow, I'm quoting here. What is a hard truth about Canada that we can't bring ourselves to say, but we all know is true? all start, a large number of Canadians would gladly take Trump's offer of statehood. This is obviously came shortly after Trump tweeted on Truth Social that Canada is effectively a state of the U.S. Again, coming in the light of the recording, what we're talking about today, where we have open questions about the future of the current government, how elections are running, the state of Canada when it comes to deficits, fiscal prudence, housing, all of the things that came to the fore at the BetaKit town hall in response to the budget 2024. When it comes to turning profits and delivering product, high marks. But I know that they can do better. And not only are they not trying to care about these things, it's obvious that they really actively swing the other way. A minus. I'm a little disappointed. I know you can do better, Shop.
At the end of the day, I'm kind of with you. I think they're an A minus. There's more for them to do, and the tricky part is, I think this is worth debating at some point. How do you get to be the second biggest capitalized company in the world? Like, how much do you have to move fast and break things, or whatever the right way of putting it is, to like futz around to get to the size and the scale that you are, because they continue to deliver. Now, I'm not saying that they need to do bad things along the way, and I'm not saying they are doing bad things along the way, but it's just fascinating to get to that point so quickly and then to maintain that ranking. It ain't easy. And there's very few companies that have done that ever in Canada, certainly. And so I'm wondering what that right balance is going forward, where they can maintain their growth and be good. What kind of actors are they going to be over the next 4 or 5 years, as other forms of competition come in to their business model?
Yeah,
including does SaaS even make sense?
As they embrace certain other things, because it's interesting. I don't think you're intentionally framing it as conflict between making the product good and some other considerations that we would consider part and parcel of a mature, responsible, adult, publicly traded company. To maybe put a button on this, though, what they care about and what they're willing to show, I think, is where they lose mark. Like they're performing really well on the tests, but in the group assignment, maybe not doing their best here. Pierre Poilievre, conservative leader, tweeted out just a few days ago that Shopify is not only the most spectacular entrepreneurial Canadian success story in the century, its leaders, Tobias Lutke, and he mentions Kaz here, not Harley, which is very, very interesting, have the backbone to stand up and fight for all entrepreneurs. Corporate Canada needs to learn from them in every way. That was, quote, treated by Mark Andreessen as Canada ACK. The other thing I'll say here, to the point of the rebound, again, you draw that perfect parallel or comparison with Wealthsimple. Wealthsimple had those post HODL coin crypto stonks layoffs, but handled those layoffs in a very professional manner. Leadership took accountability for that. And when I pushed Mike Catchin on the 10th anniversary of Wealthsimple episode that we did this year about whether or not they embraced a little bit of a FOMO marketing attitude, pushing a product maybe against their tradition of being high trust and keeping things simple, Mike had a very thoughtful response to that. When Shopify made their layoffs kind of post the pandemic growth cycle, I also think that Toby Lutke had a very strong statement of basically saying, hey, we bet that the digital adoption curve was going to stay this way. We made a bet, we overcalibrated. That's on me. We've got to change course. And then the second time that he made layoffs, he basically said that there's a difference between crafters and managers, and maybe it was the fault of some of the people he was laying off. And I think for a publicly traded company of this size that has a media strategy based upon the tweets of its leaders, to see some of these posts questioning whether or not Canada should have any sovereignty, and at a time in which a conservative government and incredibly rich U.S. tech leaders who are trying to become part of the Doge government are saying specific things. I'm just, I wouldn't want to do a group project, you guys. Again, A-, disappointed face. Okay. To close off our Canada section here, and boy howdy, this was one thing previously, and then today it's got to be do we have to invent
sorry, Douglas, just to interrupt. Given the time and given what just happened, do we even want to talk about this?
I don't want to talk about it, but I do want to just lay out the conditions here. We had previously on this recording, we had a long and thoughtful conversation about the Liberal government and their innovation agenda. Obviously, since the surprise capital gains tax rate change kind of ignited a flame of disappointment that had been bubbling up with some of the broader socioeconomic issues in Canada. We have seen basically AI regulation C27 dead on the vine. The Canada Innovation Corporation get punted this time last year to after the next election, which is pretty bold. We did in the fall economic statements Friday and today get some of the components of the SR&ED review, but that really important IP patent box, which CCI's Ben Bergen has been on this podcast multiple times, things necessary for us to compete in the 21st century, has been promised to continue to be reviewed and then maybe laid out some legislation in budget 2025, which again, highly optimistic. They punted their commitments to have open banking legislated and implemented by 2025. And today in the fall economic statement, they were happy to announce that they had delayed that for another year to 2026. Oh, and their finance minister resigned the day of the fall economic statement. It might bring the government down. And by the time you see this, Justin Trudeau might have resigned as prime minister. Previously, we were wondering if this was an F or an incomplete. I think this has got to be a rubber stamped F.
I mean, yeah, what the F? And what the F? And I said, my only differ for you, the only differentiator I have is, I don't think it's an F. I think it's an E for election.
Yeah. When that's coming, we'll see. But again, it's one of the biggest stories of the year we'll be publishing on BetaKit.com is about the Liberal government's failed innovation policy. And I'm just wondering what I'm adding to that tally by the time we publish it before the Christmas break. Okay, let's broaden this out quickly. Let's give a little quick Canadian perspective on the global tech. We talked about some of it up top. Some of these companies we talked about in our AI evaluation. I don't want to go too far into these, but I think we've laid out most of the scenarios here. Google. I would not say that Gemini has been a killer product. And we actually ran a newsletter this year about Google having a glue problem because I think they were recommending that you add that to pizza. So their search product has been noticeably worse as they try to, I guess, disrupt themselves. Innovator's dilemma, going from Web 2 search to AI results. Oh, and then again, in Canada, the Competition Bureau has tacked on to a global movement to break them up. Google still makes more money than God, but there are a variety of governments looking to take away those moneymakers and the distribution channels to make that money. C-, performing under expectations. Rob, what did you have?
Oh, I agree with your points. I think for me, it's closer to a C, D+, I guess. Not a D. I'm sorry. It's just,
these are musical notation.
I never got these grades. Actually, I only got these grades. I think that, I just think that they're at a really weird time. This is not a reflection on necessarily them and their technology. It's just, as you said, they've got the antitrust thing. You're right with the Gemini and search stuff. Not only are they have a bunch of attacks coming at them, which is like straight up legal attacks, then straight up direct competition, not just the Competition Bureau, but like Perplexity, ChatGPT has search. You know that the other AI companies are just going to have to add search into their boxes, and Google, like in any innovator's dilemma type of problem, even though they had the moonshot stuff, they still hadn't really got a moonshot to shoot.
Where does the GPT come from in ChatGPT? This is the work that Google was doing with Jeffrey Hinton and all the Toronto mans at Cohere, right? Like
that's where the G comes from, Jeffrey Hinton. I'm just kidding.
Drink. This is a company that has the largest search engine in the world in Google and the second largest search engine in the world in YouTube. Two massive platforms that seem almost unquestioned until now. But they also have a long history of not really being able to do anything else, and are in a bit of a product fight that they haven't had to be in for like two decades.
Well, since their inception, right? Like the way they beat Microsoft is they got somebody else to pay for the software, and that somebody else was advertisers. And Microsoft, you can't be like, here, have it for free. Microsoft couldn't compete. So they actually kind of got out of the software business, except for enterprises, right? They're like, you must rent software from us. And they're like, we're in the infrastructure business now. And it worked. And Google's also in the infrastructure business, but they're really in the advertising business that also happens to be the infrastructure business. So it's really hard to pivot from your core moneymaker. And it's very hard to pivot quickly once you're hitting those numbers. It seems like it's just really hard when you just keep squeezing money and squeezing the lemon and money keeps falling out. It's very hard to change fruits. That's a really bad metaphor.
The government might take the lemon away.
Yes.
Which I don't know where that factors into your metaphor, but it seemed helpful.
Scurvy.
Okay. Speaking of vitamin C minus, Apple. Remember last year, Rob, when we were like, hey, we don't think the Vision Pro is going to be very good. And this seems like a fairly risky bet along with some of their Apple Intelligence stuff. I guess those were two different podcasts. I'm combining the times that we were right into one event. How was Apple's year this year? They released new phones that were exactly the same as the old phones. With a button that they got rid of that just everyone's going to use for the camera, their intelligence stuff anyways. I don't need the new phone to use Apple Intelligence anyways, which just dropped in Canada, half-baked and not very, very good, unless you just want notification summaries that make zero sense, that are a sub-meta Siri level of hallucination. They might lose for some of the antitrust considerations we talked about before, those billions of dollars in Google search payouts to be the default search in mobile Safari. Oh, and they've got their own antitrust case with the DOJ for blocking super apps to suppress mobile cloud streaming services, messaging apps, all that stuff. Apple is also another company where you could say, and I say this as someone who happily bought the iPad mini, the new iPad mini this year, which is basically just a bigger version of last year's phone, which I also own, paid $1,000 in Mexico for the AirPod Maxes, the old ones, which I actually think is one of the best consumer tech purchases I've made in years. Like, I say this as a regular user of Apple products, that they have also not been challenged in some time, and the things that they have tried to push forward have really misunderstood their own lessons of how past products built a minimal viable experience and network effects. I am also giving an Apple a C- because they are performing under expectations.
Yeah, I think I only tilt slightly towards a C versus C-. I think you're totally right. They've not been able to get out of the iPhone machine, right? Like everything is a Halo product to the iPhone. Everything's a Halo product for the iPhone. One of the reasons they have struggled with iPads and Macs is because they want to sell you both. Like it drives me insanely crazy that I don't have LTE or 5G in my Mac. I shouldn't have to tether to anything. I should just be able to use it. But it's in the iPad.
But to what you're saying though, what we're describing Apple as a tautology. They're dominant because they're dominant. We're not necessarily they're dominant because.
And look, they missed AI, right? Like the reporting back when ChatGPT first kind of hit the thing. I think it was The Verge. It was like Apple banned the use of ChatGPT within their company, which makes sense. And they had built pretty quickly their own, but the stuff that's being released as we record this is still not better or as good as. They still have to reach out to ChatGPT to do the world knowledge stuff because they don't have anything that's big enough. So they were caught flat-footed on this particular software revolution. And
it was a real, we're going to push Google Maps because Apple Maps is bad kind of moment, but for a much more important market.
Yeah. I just don't, I mean, I love their stuff. I will keep buying their stuff. I'm legally obligated to, but I don't see where they go from here in an obvious way that is pushing the tech envelope.
Google woke up one day and found their unquestioned dominance suddenly questioned. I think what we're saying about Apple, and this is maybe where they're a next. C over Google C minus, that very same thing could happen to them.
Yeah, 100%. It's gonna. The question is when.
So we've got two more quick ones because we'd be remiss. They came up in the episode. You can't make an appearance on the BetaKit podcast and then not get letter graded. That's our thing now. I'm going to do this very quick. NVIDIA made 35 billion USD in Q3. A+. Keep doing it. This bubble's never going to end. The line's always going to go up. You have absolutely nothing to worry about. They're like, just keep selling them chips. What else is there to say? OpenAI. We had talked about their $6.6 billion financing, their massive round. But I think there's two additional considerations that I'd like to highlight here. Very topical the week after Jeffrey Hinton wins his Nobel Prize. It has been reported that OpenAI is considering monetizing AGI if it were to create it, which is like we're now not just targeting speculative fiction and sci-fi as a genre, but specific novels. And I encourage everyone to read those novels over the holidays to understand how monetizing AGI might appear to future generations. And it has also been reported that they are working with military contractors for AI drones. Jeffrey Hinton, last week, when we initially recorded this, Drink had just received his Nobel Prize award in Sweden for the work that has led to this kind of AI moment. And he gave a very brief speech, of which I'll read a small component here. There is also a longer-term existential threat that will arise when we create digital beings that are more intelligent than ourselves. We have no idea whether we can stay in control. But we now have evidence that if they are created by companies motivated by short-term profits, our safety will not be the top priority. We urgently need research on how to prevent these new beings from wanting to take control. They are no longer science fiction. He also says all of the short-term risks in his speech require urgent and forceful attention from governments and international organizations. OpenAI is considering monetizing AGI and is signing contracts with military companies for drone use. When it was first announced that Jeffrey Hinton would be winning the Nobel Prize, one of the things that he said in that speech, he was very happy that one of his students had been fired by Sam Altman. Last time that we gave this grade, I think I gave OpenAI some weird fancy number where it's like, it's A now, but wait till the final term papers are due because you might flunk out. This is a major F. Nothing but an F. You know why? Because Rob Kennedy told me that some people don't trust OpenAI with their data. There's a very good reason. By the way, actually just today, one additional addendum, because again, we're recording this again in the future, so we didn't have this in the notes, and I just remembered. OpenAI whistleblower just found dead in his apartment of apparent suicide as of today. You know, what Neil Stephenson novel are we in at the moment? Maybe it's a Cory Doctorow novel. We had him on the podcast this year. Take your pick.
I think it's The Art of the Deal.
Okay. This has been our 2024 Tech Year in Review episode. Once again, Drink. We hope you enjoyed it. I think we did a much better job than the first one. We're always getting better, Rob. And you will hear following this, if I swear to God, me stopping this recording and the file turning out properly happens. Our 2025 tech predictions, which was recorded again before this and referencing the episode that you never heard, which contains, I would say, some very down the middle expected predictions of what might happen in the year based upon what we have addressed here. And then one mother to God spicy bomb prediction from Rob Kennedy and a prediction from me that we'll probably leave in that is more embarrassing today and possibly more embarrassing tomorrow and by the hour. So we can't wait for you to listen to that. If you listen to or saw this podcast and you have different takes on what the biggest stories of the year were, other company grades that you'd like to submit in, a couple ways you can do that. Hit us on the Spotify, leave a comment, the Apple Podcasts, the YouTube, and below the doobly-doo, or just email it to us, podcast@BetaKit. We read all of that stuff, even though it's guaranteed we're never going to reply. We hope you enjoy this episode. We hope you enjoy our 25 predictions. During the fall economic statements unveiling today, I was in a 2.5 hour long budget meeting for BetaKit. We are allocating some resources to make sure the pod dopeness continues next year. So stay tuned. Let us know what you'd like to see. And if not, I guess
who resigned from that meeting?
Easy now. We got to go. All right.
Nobody.
Cheers. Bye.
Good job.
The BetaKit Podcast is brought to you by BetaKit Incorporated. Episodes are produced and edited by Darian McDonald. Your hosts are Rob Kennedy and me, Douglas Saltis. For more great reporting on Canadian tech and tech from a Canadian perspective, go to betakit.com.